Okay, so this is mostly for the video people. We are down today. There's really kind of two groups that are out. One group is just out naturally. It just so happens that they're all out on the same day. That does happen statistically. So we have a large group out today for many different reasons. And then we also have our cooking team cooking today. And when the cooking team is out, that's 5-6 people right there. So we down today. Glad you're here. This one, we are obviously continuing what we call Christian worldview. I prefer the term Christian to biblical. That's been a transition for me over time. And we're on the fourth fruit. Caleb, please stop bothering your sister. We're on the fourth fruit of worldview, which is biology. So we've gone through philosophy, we've gone through theology. Brother, I have a handout if you would. Are y'all staying? Okay. There you go. You're welcome. To go back to the beginning really quick, we did an introduction and then we talked about the power of culture. We talked about the three trees. Really quickly, somebody remind me, what are the three trees that we focus on? Three major worldviews in the world. Naturalism, transcendentalism, Christianity. Naturalism, of course, all of the materialistic beliefs, so atheism, secularism, agnosticism, materialism, evolution as part of that, as a major fruit of that. That's the natural world. Transcendental world, we said all the major Eastern faiths, right? Which ultimately, in the doing, are very similar to naturalism. So naturalism and transcendentalism, you end up in the same place, which is nowhere. So that's worth thinking about. And then, of course, Christianity, which is the worldview that we hold to. Okay? So, and then the first fruit, theology. The second fruit, philosophy. The third fruit, ethics. We've gone over those. Today we start the fourth fruit, biology. Now, I want to be clear that I'm going to present. So the question we're asking today is, what are the origins of life? What are the origins of life? I'm going to present from a Christian worldview, a Christian view of the origins of life. This is one where I am going to present the biblical case, and then I'm going to share three perspectives, even under the Christian worldview. And I'm going to land on one, but what I'm not going to do today is argue vociferously with anyone for the one view. I'm going to make a strong argument for one particular understanding of the Scriptures on the origin of life that is traditional and historic and orthodox and still viewed, but it is not the only view. And so I figured we were going to have a bigger group today, and when you have the bigger group, and of course we have every age and every background and every dynamic, I am aware that in Christianity there are many Christians who do not hold the same views on the origin of life. That makes me kind of sad. I wish we all held the same exact views on the origins of life, but it's not one of the major pillars of our faith. It's not like, arguing, is Jesus Lord or not, right? So to be a Christian, you must confess that Jesus is Lord. But in the Christian realm, you can hold many different views on the origins of life, and we will embrace each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. Are y'all with me? Yeah. And so I'm not going to argue vociferously, but I am going to land in a place where I think is the most biblical. Does that kind of put everybody at ease? Kind of understand where I'm going? So let's begin. What are the origins of life? And again, I'm going to do it from a very orthodox, historical, traditional, biblical foundation. Someone read Genesis 1. And remember also, when we do these fruits, the first one is more informational, and the second time we meet, it's more rhetorical, like, here's what the Bible says, here's what we believe. Somebody read Genesis 1, 21 to 27 for us. Do y'all want a handout? Somebody read Genesis 1, 21 to 27 for us. Go ahead, Stacy. Really loud, okay?
Yes, sir. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing with which the water teems, according to their kinds, and in every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the water in the seas and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
Good. So Stacy just read Genesis 1, verses 21 to 27 in its entirety. And we have an abbreviated section here on your handout. And what I would say is, pretty simply, the Bible declares what about the origin of all life? It began from God. Let's say some obvious things. It began from God. All life began from God. What else?
He made different kinds.
He made unique, the Bible uses the word kinds. That is still an incredibly valuable word. I'm not interested in getting rid of it. The word kind is an extremely scientific word, theological word, powerful word, plain word. The word kind is really helpful. So we're probably going to use it today. So He made all life. He made unique kinds of life. What else? What's another simple thing we can say from this text?
It was good.
It was good. God said, I made stuff. I made it wiggle. I made it fly. I made it swoop. I made it go, rah, rah. And God said, that's good. Now remember, last week in ethics, we said the word good is what?
Moral.
It's a moral word. That is a moral word. Jesus, the young man of the law, came up to Jesus and said, good teacher, what must I do to be saved? Jesus replied, why do you call me good? Remember, Jesus is not denying His own morality. He's a little perturbed that the young man is flippantly, easily going around calling things good. So the word good is a moral word. God said the creation is good. It's moral. What else? What's another simple thing? No one has said this yet. I'm curious if one of you will. Other simple things we can say about this. Okay, that's a very important part of this narrative, which is to say God says, multiply, be fruitful, produce. Increase. Good. Good. Moral. What else? No one said it yet.
He created man.
Okay, that's probably the last of the big things we could say, right? God created man in His own likeness, image, male and female. He created them. Good, good. Ladies, never forget that. It is a mystery It is profound. We still do not fully comprehend it. I think there's a mystery in marriage when God says, and let the two become one. That somehow the masculine and the feminine somehow both bear the image of God, and somehow both are better when they are together. We don't fully understand that. It's poetic, it's romantic, it's exceedingly glorious, and it is mysterious. I'm 51. I think I'm just starting to scratch it. Just starting to scratch it. There's a final thing y'all haven't said, which is kind of making me laugh, because it's kind of the whole problem. Y'all have yet to identify what the problem is for most people. No, not that. That's a good guess. That's a problem for modern scientists, by the way. They still are wrestling with this nothing that came before. Even to define nothing is to begin to set parameters on the nothing. It's an interesting concern for modern scientists. None of y'all said it. Let me say it. None of y'all mentioned the time frame, which is really at the heart of what we're talking about with origins of life. No God-fearing, Bible-believing Christians that I know of wrestle with God creating man and woman. Right? No Bible-believing, God-fearing Christians that I know of. None of them really wrestle with that. What do they wrestle with? Two concepts, really. One, did that life evolve to become human? And two, how long did it take? And none of y'all mentioned the 6 days of creation, so I find that interesting this morning. A little point for me to pause and consider. The time frame is the biggest issue for most people. And Christians wrestle with this. So again, I'm going to land at the end of this lecture, and of course along the way, that biblically, in an orthodox sense, certainly for the 2,000 years of church tradition, Christians have said, how long did it take for God to create life? How long?
6 days.
6 days. And I'm going to briefly talk about how long those days are, but I'll just make it simple. I think it was 24-hour days. I don't think it was, epochs or millennia or eons or, long extended areas of time. And my Christian brothers who do, they get in trouble, not me. You should hear them twist over their own words and stumble over their own theology when they begin to try to understand, what does it mean to say 6 days? Is it really 6 billion years? And I've heard some of my precious, sweet, loving Christian brothers, many of whom are pastors, who speak confidently about Christ, the resurrection, the atonement, who speak confidently about the Trinity, the Scriptures, who speak confidently about their faith in great detail, where it is obvious that they've poured their lives into the Scriptures. On this question, sound like children. Begin to mumble and stumble and even pause and stammer over what they mean when they say 6 days and how long were the 6 days. I won't give you the name today, but one of my favorite pastors, I wanted to Google him. I wanted to know where he stood on this issue. You understand? This is not the great issue. It's an important issue, right? But it's not one of the great issues. It's not, do you believe in the Trinity? Do you believe in salvation by grace through faith alone, in Christ alone? It's not one of these issues, but it is an important issue, right? And so I Googled my brother. I won't tell you who he was, but I love this man. I look to him for biblical counsel on things pastoral. And I've followed him for decades. And man, he hurt my heart on this issue, as he stammered and stuttered and paused and really said nothing at the end of the day on this issue. I was really disappointed. So I'm showing you my cards. I'm telling you where I land, but I land on it being 6 days. Okay? And we'll come back to that. I promise you we will. We're going to actually close on that issue. But do you have any comments or questions at the moment. So I'm already in advance telling you where I'm gonna present 3 cases, and I'm already telling you where I land, where Pastor She lands, by the way. The 2 pastors of this church both land in the same place on this issue. Does anybody have comments or questions at this point? Okay. Read John 1:3. Brother Jeffrey, read John 1:3 for us, would you? It's on the handout if you want to just... It's the second.
All things were made through Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made.
Now, Brother Jeffrey, just in your own words, how does that relate, do you imagine, to our discussion, origins of life?
Well, we were looking at Genesis that said that God created the earth and the universe and life. And here, John was identifying that process with Jesus, the Word.
Mm-hmm. Is there any more you would say?
There could be lots, but we need to go home.
Well, flesh it out just a smidge more.
Okay, so if everything was made by God, according to Genesis, here it's saying that everything was made through Jesus, which tells us that Jesus is God.
Yeah, tells us that. Tells us that Jesus is God. What else? You've already used this language, the throughness, this business of throughness. What does that tell us?
We read in Genesis that God spoke and things came into being, but when He speaks, it's a word, and that word is Jesus. So through the Word of God, which is Jesus, everything is made.
Yeah, amen. Do we understand the science of all that? Maybe, maybe not, but
it's above our pay grade.
It's above our pay grade, but we might say that you affirm me or disagree, brother. We might say that Jesus is the creative actions of God. Jesus is I don't want to depersonalize Him, so I'm trying to be careful here. Jesus is not a force. Jesus is not an energy. Jesus is not a structure. Are you with me? Christ is a person. But Brother Jeffrey, do you think it would be theologically sound to say that it was He is the creative actuary, the active participating force of the creative?
I do.
Yeah. It's difficult to even explain that or define that, isn't it? Good. Anyone else? I encourage you to read the New Testament on the origins of life. Colossians 1 is one of my favorite passages on the origins of life. All things were made by Christ, through Christ, for Christ, at His own designs, at His own plans. And this brings it back to the Trinity and back to the Father specifically, and that pleased the Father. In fact, Colossians 1 says, Colossians 1 says, it pleased God. And when I hear the word God there, I don't think just Father. I think Trinity. You have to really parse every time you see the word God in the Bible. Sometimes it means the Father. Sometimes it means the Son. Sometimes it means the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it means the Trinity. It seems to me there in Colossians 1, it's the Trinity. It pleased God to have His fullness dwell in Christ Jesus. Same passage that's saying all of this was made by Him, for Him, through Him. Did you have?
And we saw a hint of this coming in Genesis when He said, let us make man in our image.
Yeah. For sure. So, Brother Jeffrey, just make sure the camera or the microphone picks it up, saying that in Genesis, of course, that the plural language there, let us make God in our image.
Make man in our image.
Sorry, my apologies. That's terrible theology. God said, let us make man in our image. That's a terrible slip up. Thank you. Okay. All right, so let's get into some definitions. This is the part where I want you. Now I'm going to play I'm going to play an apologist a little bit, but I also want this to be strictly definitional. Okay, so these, you might say that these are definitions from a Christian point of view, but they're still solid standard definitions of the words themselves. So, and let me throw this one at you. Richard Dawkins is a beloved, regarded, internationally well-known atheist scientist who also moonlights as a pastor. He would not like it if I said that, but he's great at rhetoric. He's great at argument, and he has been passionately supportive of evolution and atheism. It's a name you should know, okay? Richard Dawkins says, however improbable the origin of life might be, we know evolutionarily it happened on Earth because we are here. By the way, does that sound like science or rhetoric? Y'all know what rhetoric is. Rhetoric is argument. What Pastor She did this morning from the pulpit is a type of rhetoric. You understand that? A lawyer in a courtroom, are they using science or rhetoric? Rhetoric. Men's lives are found innocent or guilty based on rhetoric, argument. Can science come into play in the courtroom? Yes, it better. Yes? But lives men's are weighed in the balance based on rhetoric. Preaching is rhetoric. Teaching is rhetoric. Richard Dawkins just said rhetoric. Do you see it? That's not science. Science would be, we've identified the origins of life and here's where it is, here's the code, blah, blah, blah. No. He didn't say that. He said, however improbable life might be, we know it happened because we're here from an evolutionary point of view. Brother Jeffrey, I see the crinkle of the nose. It's because you've done this a long time. You also know that that is circular logic.
And it's also the blind faith that you would...
Blind faith. How do we know evolution is true? Because we're here. Why are we here? Because evolution is true. Evolution is true. Why? Because we're here. How do we know we're here? Because evolution is true. That is circular logic. Are you with me? Which is to say, he didn't actually say anything. He didn't say anything at all. Did it sound good? Did his words sound good? Sure. He's a good wordsmith. He's a good rhetorician. I don't know how to say that word. Rhetorical person. But it's not evidence. And Brother Jeffrey, you're exactly right. It is blind faith. And he does that a lot. Okay, let's do some terms. What is the study of living things and their origins? Biology. We're just talking about biology here, right? The origin, study of living things and their origins. Do Christians do good biology? Yes or no? Do Christians do good biology? Yes or no? Yes. Do evolutionary scientists often do good biology? Yes or no? Yes. Living biologists who study living things, often do great science. Often. When they do theory, when they do rhetoric, when they do supposition, they are not doing science. Science is science, and everything that isn't science isn't science. So I didn't put this down as one of the terms, but we've talked about it. What is science? Verifiable, viewable, falsifiable, repeatable. I probably didn't do those in order, but do we agree that that's the definition of science? You have to be able to view it. Do we agree? Verify it. I guess that's another way of saying verify it, isn't it? Viewable. Testable. Repeatable. Do we agree on the basic definition of science? Do we also agree scientists often don't do science? This used to be a thing. I used to use this example for years. I don't know if it's a thing anymore. There used to be a Twitter account, and all it was scientists posting to this account, admitting every time they faked data, or messed up data, or falsified data. I don't remember the handle. I wouldn't know if it's still going. But there was a time you could go to that, and it was crazy how often that happens. Crazy the amount of times that human frailty sinfulness, just weakness of men ends up in the scientific process. Which of course it does, right? So much of our culture in the modern era, the era that we're living in, says that science is infallible, science is proper, science has no bias, this kind of language, right? What's kind of put a lie to that in the last 4 years? Do people have more trust in science in 2024 or less? More or less? Less, why?
Fauci.
COVID.
COVID, yeah.
Are y'all with me? How much political information, how much rhetoric, how much argument, how much supposition, how much politics, how much money came into the process of science in the last 4 years? Are you with me? Now, did I just tell you what to believe about COVID? I did not. Did I just name drop or tell you not to trust science? I did not. I'm reminding you of how frail and broken the scientific method can be, right? So this idea that somehow science somehow makes us better humans, makes us more objective, makes us more sinless, makes us more rational, it doesn't. The same irrational people who are going through a divorce and changing their gender and hating their mom, the same people who are watching way too much television and not working out, the same people who are eating too much fried food, those are the same people in those labs doing those same procedures. Are you with me? And if you have a bad day or a bad week or a bad year, you don't think that's going to affect the data of the scientific process that you're working on? Because I assure you it will. I assure you it will. I kind of rambled there a little bit, but I think that's important. Biology is the study of living things. Science is verifiable, testable, repeatable. What is evolution? Evolution is a theory that species evolve over time by random genetic mutation and natural selection. I do not have enough time today to completely support or pull apart evolution. You just got to know from a Christian perspective, evolution doesn't hold a lot of water. And I'm going to give you some data at the end and tell you to go do some research. Okay? If we had 20 hours on this topic, I would spend 18 hours on this. Okay? But I have about 6 more minutes. So we got to move on. Design. This is the one you may not know about. Raise your hand if you know anything about design theory. Design theory. A few of you do. Good. Design theory, of course, the theory that the characteristics of the universe and of all life is best explained by an intelligent designer. Notice nowhere in that definition did I say, and that Jesus is Lord. Do you have to be a Christian to believe in intelligent design? No. I know intelligent designers. I know men right now, scientists right now, philosophers, scientists, mathematicians, engineers, men of all scientific realms, biology, chemistry, all of it. I know intelligent designers, some of whom do not believe in God. I know intelligent designers, men who follow this theory, some of whom think this is real, some of whom think that it could have been alien life who begat human life. Those men exist. Those scientists exist. Now, all you're doing is pushing the ball back further, right? That's all you're doing. Same as like, we need to figure out this 6-day business. Because if you say 6 days is 6 billion years, all you've done is just make a bigger problem for yourself. You haven't solved anything. Because then you have to start asking questions like, when did sin come to creation? And you don't have an answer for that, my friend, my brethren. If you say life is God is in control and life is 6 billion years old. Okay, time out. So when did sin come into the world? Are you with me? These are the types of questions that old earth creationists can't answer. Okay. So design theory is helpful in you understanding that the evolutionary theory is not the only way of considering the origins of life. Design theory says life is too complex to have accidentally gotten here. And here's the great thing. As more science is revealed, And this is what, if you hear nothing else I say today, hear this. In 2024, this is to your point, Brother Jeffrey, about faith. In 2024, it is harder to be an evolutionist than it was in 1924. And in 1924, it was harder than it was in 1894. In other words, when Darwin came up with a theory in the 1800s, 1700s, early 1800s, mid 1800s, when Darwin came up with a theory, microscopes were terrible. Think about that. Microscopes were terrible. In 1924, astronomical ability was terrible. So in 1894, Darwin couldn't go really small. And in 1924, we couldn't go really long and far away. In 2024, we can do both of those things. We can go really, really far away, and with Einsteinian relativity, we understand more of the laws of the universe than ever before. And a 6 billion year old universe, we're having trouble with making that math work. There are some scientists who would say, we're pretty sure that the universe would have just completely expanded at this point if the universe is as old as some of us think it is. And it's not, as an example. But we can go really small. Darwin thought the cell was a pretty simple thing. Turns out the cell is an entire manufacturing process. Each cell is like the size of UMMC. Largest job provider in the state of Mississippi. Turns out each cell has more going on in it than Darwin could have imagined goes on in the whole body. So for a scientist in 2024 to continue to believe in evolution, and I haven't even gotten to the DNA code. I'm just talking about a cell. Go smaller. Turns out that is it AGT? What are the four letters? AGT?
ATCG.
C. ACTG. I got 3 out of the 4. With my 3 out of the 4, you would not have life. Turns out you got to have all 4. You got to have them in a particular order. The guy who oversaw the Human Genome Project, which just completed in the last 10 years-ish, the guy who oversaw that is a devout Christian. You should hear him talk about the complexity of the human genome. It is harder in 2024 to be an evolutionist than it's ever been. And what's cool is, and you should get on YouTube and start looking for some of this, some of them are starting to admit it. Some of them are starting to admit it. That the complexity is too much, the information is too great, the design is too apparent, and this could not have happened using evolutionary processes. So design theory is a pretty important theory. It's going to be even more important in the decades to come. Abiogenesis, A-B. So look at that word number 5, biogenesis. Abiogenesis, just put the letter A in front of it. Abiogenesis, probably from the Latin, meaning lack of origin, right? Unorigin. Like a theist believes in God, an atheist does not believe in God. Abiogenesis is the belief that life originally came from non-living matter. Evolutionists cannot create life. And I don't mean humans, I mean single cells. They can't even get protein strands to get going. This was a couple weeks ago. So this was like, I think this was at Harvard, and it was a PhD professor from Rice, and it was another PhD scientist. The fellow from Rice is a believer, and his attaboys are this long. Dr. Jeffrey, you would appreciate, if you saw what I'm talking about, that this man from Rice University knows his stuff in his field, right? He's got patents, he's got books, in fact, I had to look this up. I know these are things you know. What's the score where you are referenced by other scholars, and the higher the score shows that you are an important person in your field? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't know the name.
Yeah, there's two of them, and I looked them both up. This guy's got great scores in both categories. He is well regarded. His name's down here. It's James Tour, T-O-U-R, James Tour. Last name on this list. James Tour was one of the men. The other man, I don't recall his name. Watch this hour-and-a-half long presentation at Harvard, where it's the faculty of Harvard listening to these two men have a debate. James Tour, literally, first thing he does when he gets up there, because the other guy, the evolutionary guy, he's trying to build protein life in a lab. And James Tour's just like crushing it in the real scientific world. And James Tour goes first, and he basically just gets up there and says, my colleague is going to come up here and he's going to use poetry, allegory, symbolism, computer model. None of that science. You with me? He's going to use rhetoric. He's going to use explanation. He's going to use passion. Not science. You with me? And James says, and he's going to try to convince you that we're there and we're doing it, and that we've created life in a lab. But the reality is, and then James Tour scientifically just dismantles the fact that this man has not created any life. And they, for decades, have been saying, in fact, James Tour said that as early as like the 60s, they were saying they thought they were 3 years away, 5 years away, 6 years away, within a decade. I know that tickles you.
I just am remembering I'm that old.
Yeah. But you could have heard these men saying such as that. Within a decade, within 5 years, within 3 years. James just quotes them. Just quotes these men themselves. It's 2024, people. We still hadn't done it. Now, I'm not saying we're not ever going to do it. The point I'm not making is that we can't do it. The point I'm saying is it's really, really hard. There's an old joke, and I love it. Scientists came to God one day and said, we've created life. We now understand the mysteries of life. It's as if we're equals. This is an old joke. God says, oh, because you can create lab, now we're equal? The scientists go, yes, God, we can now do what you do. God says, show me. The scientists get out all their laboratory equipment and began to do it, and God says, no. Start with nothing. Isn't that a great joke? I'm not saying humans are never going to create protein strands that are going to survive. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that even if we do, we're like toddlers playing with Legos. Everything was placed in front of us in the first place. But we can't even do that yet. And we're a long way behind.
Even if they could, they still got to explain how it happened
Yeah.
by accident.
Yeah. It's a well-made point. Well-made point. Okay, so do y'all see that I'm passionate about this and we could spend 20 hours on this? Do y'all see that? I want you to be intrigued, and I want you to I can't give you in 45 minutes all of this. This is 40 hours of work. This is 80 hours of work. This is 100 hours of work. But I hope you're interested. Microevolution, this is... I've said this to you before. The French figured this out. We've got to figure this out. The French figured it out. The Germans figured it out. And politically and ideologically, the left in this country have figured it out. We've got to figure this out. Language rules everything. If I can teach you how to speak, I can train you how to think. And Christians have got to be mindful of that. We've got to be mindful that language dictates argument. When someone says the evolution of society, what they really mean is the design of society. Or the evolution of a car. The car's an easy one. You'll watch a car commercial and it'll say, the newest LX 4000, the evolution of the LX. There were 600 engineers working on that car. Yes? They start with clay and they start with graphite pencils, doodling and claying it up, and then they get the real engineers involved and bring in combustion and electrical. And are you with me? If you really want to be impressed with design, look at the combustion engine and just sit with it for an hour. It's a remarkable piece of machinery. Remarkable. Little explosions, one after the other, very rapidly, contained. That's some incredible design, amen? That's design. That didn't happen accidentally. There's an insect called the bombardier beetle. Were you going there?
I'd already thought of it.
You do it. You do it. Go immediately from the car to the bombardier beetle. So tell us.
It's a bug that defends itself by squirting boiling water on its predators. It's got two glands that have different chemicals, and when it releases them both at the same time, it creates a boil that would destroy the mouth of any predator that's trying to eat it.
The two glands come out of the rear of the bug, angled to meet as soon as they leave the animal's rear end. When those chemicals shoot out, they combine, tiny little explosion. It's some type of explosion using the two chemicals. It's a chemical explosion. We go from a car that is clearly designed, yes, to a bug that's, anyway, come on people. Are you with me? There's so much we could say there. How does that, yeah, there's so much we could say. It's too much. It's too much for one day. Microevolution is the one we all agree on. That is changes within a species, changes within a kind. Watch a football team. Look at a football team. That's microevolution at work. You got guys that are 330 pounds. They are the linemen. And you got guys that are 160 and 6'4", catching the ball 8 feet in the air and running the length of the field. Whether you're talking about humans, whether you're talking about any animal, whether you're talking about the easiest one to think of is a dog. A dog, we have been breeding dogs for millennia, and we're really good at it, which is how you get a teacup poodle, and how you get a collie, and how you get a dog that's back is this high. Now, I don't know dogs as well as some, so I'm just going to say this big, in the middle. But the breeding of dogs that's microevolution. But tell me this. Can the little dog breed with the big dog? Yes or no? Come on, use your scientific brain. Can the little dog breed with the big dog? Yes! They're both dogs. Turns out dogs can breed with each other. Because the Bible said, let every kind produce with its own kind. Turns out the word kind, the word is a valuable scientific concept. So no matter what we do to manipulate the data and the design and the evolutionary, the micro of it all, we're still just getting dogs to breed with dogs. Can a dog breed with a cat? No? Why not? Because they are outside of species, they are outside of kind, and we still don't know, we can't make stuff outside of species. And then of course, some people would say, what about a donkey and a horse? They're both horses. We just call one a donkey. And not only that, when you breed a horse and a donkey, what happens? It creates a mule, which we consider to be a different species, same kind. What happens? Sterile. Congratulations on your one mule. You now have one mule. And if you want two mules, you have to breed another donkey and another horse to get a second mule. So even in those areas where, an evolutionist would say, oh, but you got mules. No, not really. Still two horses. We just call one a donkey. Still ends up with sterility. Still the same kind. One's not a horse, one's not a cat. One's not a spider, one's not a flea. One's not a fish, one's not a giraffe. So microevolution is small and adaptive changes within a species. Beaks, Darwin's finch beaks, microevolution. Macroevolution is the one we're all disagreeing over. Macroevolution is large-scale fundamental changes turning one species into another species. We've yet to be able to do that on planet Earth. We only have the theory that it's been happening forever. Are you with me? Wouldn't you also think, here's two things about that. Two things. One, scientists, again, in the 20th century said, we would find those intermediate species by now. And they were saying that in the 1890s, 1920s, 1940s, 1970s, 1990s. It's 2024. We still don't have any intermediary species. And here's what, when I say intermediary species, think cat dog, right? Think lion horse. Think ratfish, right? That would be something you might think of as an intermediary, because we don't find any because there aren't any. But they'll point to some and they'll say, well, but this fish has legs. You sure that's not a fish with legs? Because I can show you right now on planet Earth some fish with legs. One of my favorite stories, and this involves a South Vietnamese fisherman, is evolutionary scientists had said for the longest time, I think it's a coelacanth, don't hold me to that, but I think it was a coelacanth that's like 6 million years old. We have fossils of it. It's this really grotesque looking cool sea creature. And they were like, man, coelacanth, wouldn't that be something? And then like in the last 30 years, a Vietnamese fisherman caught one. And so when he pulls it aboard, all the scientists are like, oh, we have a living fossil. We have a creature that's from the whatever age. And here, no. You just caught a fish that you've called a coelacanth, and this is weird. It's a weird looking fish, and we found one alive because it's part of the record. Are you with me? And there's lots of stories like that. So evolutionists in their children's textbooks that they want to train children, even through college, are very simple and orderly, and it all just makes sense. Just this, then this, then this, then this. You get these guys in a room where they're honestly talking to each other, they're as confused as any group of any one individuals on the planet. Their theories aren't working out, the data's not working out, the timeline's not working out. They admit that to themselves. They won't say it to you. They certainly won't teach your children the truth. But amongst themselves, they go, we're going to have to keep twisting this thing. We're going to change it a little. And they've done that. I have a hard time keeping up because about every 10 to 20 years, they change the language of the theory to match where they hope the data's going. And I can't keep up with it. English major, theologian. But trust me, they're doing it. About every 10 to 15 years. Well, it's not this, it's punctuated equilibrium. It's not punctuated equilibrium, it's more this. It's not this, it's that. They're constantly we call that moving the goalpost where I'm from. Because the theories aren't working out for them. But then they'll come teach your children, oh, it's evolution. Brother Jeff, do you want to jump in here at any point? I'm rambling. I'm literally like a madman up here.
The proofs of evolution that I was taught in high school and college, every single one of them was a flaw.
You talk a little bit louder.
In high school and college, my biology classes taught us evolution, and the examples they used, every single one of them was a literal fraud.
Can you give us one example?
Haeckel's embryos, which was a picture that they had. They had this cute slogan, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, whatever that meant. And it said that in the womb, the embryo goes through the different stages of evolution. And they had these pictures that were drawn by some German scientist named Haeckel. Well, he just made up the whole thing.
Yeah. I would encourage y'all. This is not a plug, but I took groups to this. I took groups to the Creation Museum for 5 years, and I know some of our church members have been. Has anybody in this room been to the Creation Museum? We need to go. It would be a wonderful trip. And Brother Jeffrey, when you first go in, one of the first things they do is talk about those sorts of things. The pig bone that ends up being part of a jaw, that ends up being an intermediary humanoid species that a scientist will use. Did I mention pig bone? Right? Stuff like that. And they spend a lot of time on that. Okay, let me wrap up because we're almost out of time. Information theory is another theory that says the information is too complex to have done all the things that evolutionists say that it can. It just literally cannot do all the things that evolutionists say that it can do. And so again, I want to encourage you, just get on YouTube and just type in things like information theory and look for... Listen, I watch and listen to a lot of evolutionary scientists talk. It doesn't do me any harm. I just don't believe 70% of what comes out of their mouth. But it's not harmful to listen to these guys. I'm encouraging you to do your own research. I'm encouraging you to do your own study. Simply because it's too much. It's too much information. Irreducible complexity is a theory that biological systems with complex interacting parts would not function if one or some of the parts were removed and could not therefore live long enough to procreate and further evolve. That is a Michael Behe theory, and it is pretty great, and I love it. Also called the mousetrap theory, and I'm going to make it really simple for you. Evolution basically teaches that simple, stay with me, simple life evolves over time into more and more and more complex life. Do you agree that that's the general theory of evolution? Simple life over time, how much time? A lot of time. Evolves into more and more complex life. There's two main problems with that. Michael Behe identified this. There are others who have as well. Number one is you have to live long enough to procreate. If your life is so simple that you are struggling to survive, you have to live long enough to procreate to then pass on your hopeful DNA, your hopeful genetic. And that's what's so weird about it is you are creating DNA, but somehow you're able to pass on just that DNA. How about all the junk DNA that you're struggling against to survive? Don't you also pass on that DNA? Turns out you do. Yet another problem. But the mousetrap argument, Behe's argument says, how does a non-functioning eye become a functioning eye? How does a fish in a cave go from having non-functioning eyes to evolving to having functioning eyes? At what point does it even know that it needs to evolve to have functioning eyes? At what point is it an advantage to that fish to have functioning eyes? So the model that we've been presented, which is evolution knows. Here's what's crazy about it. They're using everything but the name of God. Evolution has an idea. Evolution knows. Survival knows. The concepts are aware. They're using everything in a sense of awareness and pre-knowledge and ability just so they don't have to say the name God. But things that are simple... What's the second law of thermodynamics? Is it the second law or the third law? Everything moves from a state of order to chaos, a state of energy to entropy. I may have just put a couple of those laws together. Probably did. English major. Do things in your world, in your life, do things become safer, better, cleaner, work better? When you buy a new car, 5 years later, does that car run better than when you bought it? How's your body holding up? Some of us in here getting on up in age. Are we physically better than we've ever been, brother? I'm afraid to say we're not, right? Yet we're supposed to believe in evolution. Things go from a state of chaos to order, from simple to complex. And all of this through some unnamed, unmoved force that has a design and a plan. So that's part of the problem. And then the mousetrap says that's just not how life works. You can't remove the snapper from a mousetrap. In other words, a mousetrap can't be simple to start with and catch mice. A mousetrap without a clapper doesn't catch mice. Now I'm mixing my analogy, but this works. If a mousetrap doesn't have a clapper to catch mice, how is it going to survive to procreate another mousetrap? Isn't a mousetrap without a spring and a clapper, isn't it just a piece of wood and some metal? Would you even call it a mousetrap? I wouldn't. I wouldn't call a base plate and a little piece of metal and a spring over here. I would not call that a mousetrap. I'd call that a piece of wood, a spring, and a clasp. Once it's all been put together, once it's all working, I would call that a mousetrap. But that is a complex machine that has been designed and put together to work. And if I start removing pieces and parts of it, it no longer works. We're supposed to believe evolution starts with nothing and ends up with this table, that coffee, and you. And as many information theorists would say, as many intelligent design scientists would say, all the time in the world's not going to get you to here. Time is not a magical word. Time in and of itself is not a magical concept. But to the evolutionists, the answer is always just time. Just time. Just more time. We just need more time. So I am encouraging you to, as Brother Jeffrey said, he was learning these falsehoods 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Maybe not so long ago, but longer. Yeah, 60 years. I was trying to take it easy on you, brother. Yeah. Okay, let me wrap up. There are 3 branches of thought in Christianity on the origins of life. Intelligent design is not in conflict with Christian thought. Do you hear me? Intelligent design is not in conflict with Christian thought. You can be a Christian and believe in intelligent design. Intelligent design is a tool that anyone can use to question evolution. And again, you don't have to be a Christian to believe in intelligent design. So intelligent design is a tool to be used by Christians. Some of the proponents, Michael Behe, Stephen Meyer, William Dembski, James Tour. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scientists who believe in intelligent design. I do not have the space or time to tell you about them. But these are 4 that I would encourage you to pursue. Old Earth creationist. Here's the problem. Old Earth creationist. Who is following Old Earth creationism? Sadly, the majority of mainline Protestants believe that the earth is 6 billion or 6 million, the universe is really, really old, evolution was in play. So the majority of Protestants, the majority of evangelical leaders, and the majority of Catholic leaders. The old earth creation as a thought has been used by Catholic leaders since I think the 1960s. Brother Jeffrey, does that sound right?
I don't follow them.
Yeah, but does that sound right? Mid-century? Francis Collin, who is the leader of the Human Genome Project, I mentioned him earlier. He's the leader of the Human Genome Project. He believes in an old earth. You may believe in the old earth and be a follower of Christ. You may be saved, born again, a Christian, and believe old earth. The people who I find most are old earth, I will say again, are sincerely followers, sincerely love God, and sincerely are very confused on things like evolution. They're just confused. They take in the scientific data and say, I trust those guys because they're scientists. And then they come to the Bible and they say, I seem to trust almost all of this, if not all of this. But on this issue and on issues related to it, I'm going to defer this to the scientists. Now, are you starting to hear my argument? If you have to choose, this will be fun. My phone represents science. To the old earth creationist, to the Christian who believes that evolution was the method that God used, and the earth is really old and the universe is really old. Basically what that Christian has done is said, these two are competing on this issue, and I choose to put science as my foundation. You with me? That's what they're doing. Science is my foundation, and then that means the Bible poetically got it wrong. Allegorically got it wrong. Scientifically got it wrong. And then they try to harmonize these two things. Are you with me? That's what an old earth creationist is doing. God bless them. I love them. I'm surrounded by them. I'm not angry at them. I don't hate them. I don't dislike them. But they are inconsistent on this point. You with me? You don't have to agree with me. Do you understand what I'm saying? A young earth creationist, and this is where I'll land, a young earth creationist looks at the science, looks at the Bible, and says, I'm not willing to give this up because I know too many scientists. And I do know too many scientists. They're human, just like me. Frail, fragile, just like me. They make just as many mistakes as me, sometimes way more than me. I do not trust the science to be my foundation on the origins of life. Rather, I will go back to this book for the origins of life. And if this book says 6 days, I'm going to stick with that. And I'm going to close with this. I want you to read Exodus chapter 20, verses 9 through 11. We're going to close with this. Exodus 20, verses 9 through 11. I was a young earth creationist before I read this. But after I read this, I found it impossible to think of anything else. Let me ask you a question. For those of you that have spent, you can read it, you cannot, you can wait, you cannot. For those of you that have spent any real time in the Bible, and I mean real time, you've spent a portion of your life reading the Scriptures. Are there parts of it that you identify as being more divine than others? So if Judas says something, how are you weighing that? What if Satan says something in the Bible? How are you weighing that? What if Peter says something? How are you weighing that? At one point, Peter told Jesus not to go towards the cross. You recall that? How are you weighing that? Because I can tell you how I weigh it. When I read that and Peter says, Lord, no, don't do it. I go, Peter, come on, guy. What are you doing? You're ignorant. You're selfish. You're sinful. You don't know. Peter, slow down. Are you with me? How do you weigh something if God Himself says it? Do you understand the question? How do you weigh something if God says it? From His own mouth.
Yes, ultimately.
Right? Are y'all with me? Exodus chapter 20, verses 9 through 11. 10 Commandments. Verse 8. Let's start with verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. That's the one we always read, by the way. Right? One of the 10 Commandments. Hey, work 6 days, don't work 7. Why? Because God said to. God said, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Take every seventh day off and rest. Rest. It's the worst thing Christians in the West do, by the way. We're terrible at it. We constantly break this commandment. Okay? Work 6 days, rest 7. But there's a commentary right in the middle of the 10 Commandments. There is a commentary in the middle. Somebody put commentary in my 10 Commandments. Look at verse 10. But the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, or daughter, nor your manservant, or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. Does God take the Sabbath seriously? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
Verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But He rested on the seventh day. So far, there's no new information for us. Are you with me? Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Here's what I want you to understand. If you interpret the 6 days of creation as epochs, you should never, ever, ever take a day of rest. Because you got 6,700,493 more years of work to do. God giving His own law to Moses for all humans of all time says, I did a thing and I did it in 6 days. And in the same way that I did it in 6 days, I'm telling you to honor the week. In other words, for me, when I came to this text, I said, wait a minute. Men may think that 6 days of creation are epochs of time. Men may think that this is some stranded out, long, it's messy. It's complicated. It's not. You know who said it's not? God said it's not. In His commentary on the Sabbath, God through Moses to the people, to all humans, is saying, in the same way that I worked 6 and took off 1, I say to you, work 6 and take off 1. You know who it's not complicated for? God. You know who it's not messy for? God. You know what 6 days meant 6 days to? God. So when I hear people say, well, but Peter says a day unto the Lord is as 1,000 years. Yeah, because God's eternal. Time is nothing to Him, except when He chooses to enter it and submit to it. Mind-blowing. So I close with that. It is a biblical argument for 6 days of creation, and it is a biblical argument for a young earth. We can still be brothers and sisters if you're not a young earth creationist. But I challenge you, don't give up your faith for these men. Many of whom are just, I'm going to use Brother Jeffrey's word, many of whom are just lying to you. Don't give up your faith for men who are fickle liars, who will say one thing in your textbooks. They will train children one way and then amongst themselves be honest with each other. Don't do it. What a great regret that would be. Okay, so I'm done. I have made a strong argument. There are these 3 branches of thought. All have their devotees. Like I said, intelligent design can be used by anybody. Questions or comments? I know that was a freight train, and I know that was a fire hose. Questions or comments? Josh, I just threw a ton of stuff at you. Give me a response. Anything at all. Overwhelmed?
I think I just like your point about how it's supposed us to always base our foundation in Scripture, since science is always changing. I think I don't know if this is quoted correctly, but Albert Einstein said that, when one question is answered in science, 2 more arise.
Yeah, good.
So,
Einstein also said God does not play dice with the universe. Einstein was humble enough to know that he did not know.
yeah.
To your point.
So it's like somebody that profound in
His realm.
his
Yeah.
realm would say that it's good to, of course, not. It's good for us to realize that science is just our one way that we try to understand things, but it's not what we should do.
And let me say this, John, because I thank you for that. Let me say this in response. I am not knocking that which is verifiable, testable, repeatable, and profitable. That's science. I'm knocking everything else. I'm knocking the theories. I'm knocking the suppositions. I'm knocking the arrogance. I'm knocking the ego. I'm knocking the laziness. I'm knocking the anti-godness of these men.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the things that I'm talking about. I'm not knocking science.
Yeah.
Science got me here. Science will get me home. God got me here. God got me home. But God uses science. Since day one of creation, He's been using the natural world for His glory. But He also uses the supernatural world for His glory.
I just like how you're reminding us. It's good for us to remember to not idolize that. You know.
Can I say this? And then I want more responses if y'all have them. But the great scientists of humanity have mostly been Christians. I mean, the greatest. And so, did you know that theology was once defined? I bet you know this. Theology was once called the queen of the sciences. The queen of the sciences. And all God's people said, these are men 15, 16, 17, 1800s. These were men who said math is great, biology is great, chemistry is great, micro, macro, plant. These were men studying all of this and more. And then they were studying theology because they understood that it was superior to those ologies and necessary. So any other final comments or questions? I didn't know any other way to do this. I just crammed like 6 weeks of Christian worldview into like 45 minutes. Any other final comments or questions?
Yeah, I'd like to add on one comment. Because if Christians still believe in evolution, it could be a serious problem.
Agreed.
Because it can, that's one verse at least we can go back to and refute the evolution. That verse is actually core of the salvation. Romans chapter 5 verse 12, right? It's like, I don't know.
Is that the way? It's not the
death come through one man.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is referring back to Adam,
Right.
and that comes from that. If you believe evolution, you're going to believe that you die, people die before that.
That's right.
Or whatever life.
That's right.
Before that. So that kind of mentality going to confuse Christians.
That's right.
in salvation.
Confuse everybody, right?
Yeah. So
It's a very well made point. It's a great point to end on. Let me just put this tiny little piece on it. Thank you, brother, for saying that. The one that always comes to my mind for the wages of sin is death.
yeah.
And the thing you're bringing up, which is great to end on, is, I'm just going to say it a little differently. If evolution is true, then how do we get to sinless Adam and Eve in a garden? Because then you've got millions, if not billions, of years of death. So thank you for that. So Christians say, and I think this is great science and great theology, sin brings death. And to your point, if that's not how it happened, if it was evolutionary processes, you've got a really long time of death. And it just doesn't hold. The creation story to me, in light of modern science, makes more sense, not less.
Yeah, exactly.
More sense. Because it holds to the laws of entropy and order and chaos. In other words, what God's saying is, hey, when I started it, it was all good. And then you guys wound it down. See what sin does? And so for a Christian, we don't compartmentalize, right? We're not doing this over here and this over here. We're saying all of life is tainted by sin, and sin brings death. That's what we are able to say. Evolutionists aren't able to say either. There's no order, there's no meaning, there's no purpose to any of it. Yeah, thank you for that.